This was a case that never should have happened.
When a former homecoming queen doesn't return home one night, investigators are baffled.
At first, the facts of the crime didn't make any sense. Why would the perpetrator spend so much time at the scene? What was he doing there?
To a profiler, the information at hand points to a dangerous mind.
We didn't know if this was his first crime, but we needed to make sure it was his last.
On an early spring morning in downtown Orlando, a teacher is preparing for class at the local school. Suddenly, she hears a loud noise coming from the adjacent alley. Concerned, she walks outside and peers into the trash-strewn passageway and sees a woman's body lying on the ground. Shaken, she calls 911. Bicycle patrol officer John Cesari of the Orlando Police Department is closest to the scene.
I was on routine patrol right here in downtown Orlando when I got a radio call to 33 West Washington Street in reference to a body in an alleyway. And at this time, I responded as quickly as I could.
But as he approaches the area, something catches his eye.
As I was pedaling towards the alleyway, I saw a red Geo Metro pulling out of the parking lot at a very high rate of speed, turning right on Washington Street. That's when I instinctively took the tag number down.
Then Cesari moves to the alley and is dismayed by what he sees.
As I entered the alleyway, right about here, I saw the body of a naked female. She was beaten, and she was obviously posed. I yelled to her to see if I can get a reaction, but I got none, and I realized she was dead. I started thinking about the Geo who was speeding through the parking lot, and I wondered if that car had anything to do with this.
Cesari immediately runs the vehicle's tag number.
It was registered to a Michelle McGrath, and I wondered if it was the same woman lying in the alleyway.
Did the killer escape from the crime scene in the victim's car? Investigators soon confirm that a purse found in the alley contains the driver's license of the car's owner, 27-year-old Michelle McGrath. Authorities put out a bulletin to be on the lookout for the missing vehicle. But nothing turns up. Police start the investigation by interviewing Michelle's family.
When I first found out about the news, I came over to my mom's house, and it was just a strange experience. The police were in and out of here asking questions, asking us about her friends and, you know, any possible people that we could think of that might want to do harm to her.
The family tells police that the night Michelle was killed, she was out dancing with friends in Orlando's downtown clubs. They can't imagine anyone who would want her dead.
Michelle had a lot of friends. She was homecoming queen in high school. For all we knew, everybody loved her. She had such a presence in Orlando, in downtown Orlando, and she just knew so many people down there.
Could one of her friends be responsible for what happened? It's up to Orlando PD lead detective Dave Griffin to start putting the pieces together. He begins with Michelle's last known movements, trying to establish when her killer first made contact.
The last bar that she left was about 2:30 in the morning. And so we're figuring, as far as a timeline, this person was with her from approximately 2:30 the evening of the 23rd till about 7:30 on the morning that her body was discovered.
Police believe the perpetrator made contact with Michelle when she left the club and remained in the alley until the teacher heard the door slam the next morning. That means he spent 5 hours with his victim. an unusually long time, even for a crime like this.
It was apparent that Michelle was the victim of a sexual battery. It was later determined by the medical examiner that Michelle died as a result of blunt force trauma to the head.
One other aspect of the crime intrigues investigators: the deliberate positioning of the body after Michelle had been killed.
I knew that she'd been posed there. This is very unusual for a suspect to spend that much time with a victim.
Detectives know only that a dangerous killer is roaming the streets. Worried that he could strike again, investigators call on criminal profiler Dale Hinman for help.
Profilers are trained to analyze behavioral clues that may be left at a crime scene. We all knew that whoever killed Michelle McGrath was a person who was apparently willing to take risks. He committed a murder in a high-traffic area, and he lingered at the scene well past the commission of the crime.
Based on her years of experience, Agent Hinman believes this particular offender poses a serious threat to the community.
It shouldn't have taken 5 hours to commit this crime. We thought whoever killed Michelle McGrath enjoyed what he was doing, and he may do it again.
Profiler Dale Hinman and Detective Dave Griffin meet at the crime scene. The more Hinman knows about how and where Michelle died, the sooner she'll be able to formulate a profile of the person responsible.
Was there any indication of a struggle before the alleyway, like out in the parking lot?
Yeah, we found the victim's purse strap just north of where her car had been parked. We also found some blood stains on a parking stop and also on the wall just outside the alley right there.
So she certainly didn't come into the alleyway willingly, because there was all this struggle and blood outside of the alley.
Yeah, from the autopsy we determined that Michelle did have some defensive wounds on her hand, so I believe that she did struggle with him.
Well, if the fight was really violent in the parking lot and in the alley, then perhaps the offender has some injury to his hands or arms as well.
That may help identify him later, but in the meantime, Hinman is interested in the amount of time the killer spent with his victim before the teacher heard the door slam and alerted the police.
This is where her body was found, right here. It appeared that she had been posed. It was quite apparent that she was a victim of a sexual battery. One of the things that was of interest to us is we believe he stayed with the victim for about 5 hours.
Investigators may never know why he remained in the alley, but it does tell Hinman something about him.
This makes this a very high-risk crime for this offender, because it would have made more sense if he had left much earlier and drove away in her car before the sun came up and the people arrived in the parking lot to go to work. He's not very sophisticated, or he would have done things differently to avoid detection.
Hinman believes they are looking for a relatively inexperienced criminal. Now she needs to know why the perpetrator selected McGrath.
This is the bar that Michelle was last seen in by some friends. So she would have left there around 2:30 in the morning, come over here and gone to where her car was parked just outside the alleyway.
Considering the area, it could be that the offender was in the bar and saw her and followed her out here, or he was lurking in the parking lot just waiting for anybody to come out, looking for some victim of opportunity.
Yeah.
But as investigators begin their search, one of McGrath's friends catches their attention.
After talking to some of the people, we came up with the name of Dave Colbert. He was just a friend of hers and I think was infatuated with her. Some of the witnesses had said that Mr. Colbert had been acting suspicious around the victim, and she was a little concerned about his activities around her at that time also.
Could Agent Hinman's profile about the killer not knowing Michelle be wrong? Suspicion deepens when detectives trace Michelle's phone records and find that Colbert made numerous calls to her apartment in the days after her murder, but never left any messages.
Dave was calling her answering machine and just listening to her voice after her death, apparently just to hear her, which we were concerned about.
Colbert also seems unusually anxious to make himself available to police.
Dave Colbert kept trying to assist us in this investigation. He became a little bit more involved than a normal witness would want to be involved in a situation like this. And we became concerned about some of his actions and some of his eagerness to participate in this investigation.
Would David Colbert kill Michelle McGrath out of an obsessive infatuation? Could the perpetrator have had a close connection to Michelle after all? The police have a suspect, but there's no evidence linking him to the crime. And Agent Hinman doesn't think he fits the profile. Meanwhile, investigators have found something that may identify the killer. When print analyst Deb Fisher processes evidence from the crime scene, she notices a faint image on an alley door handle.
When I first examined the item of evidence, I noticed rich detail in a reddish-brown stain. But because of the textured background, some additional processing needed to be done. The next step was to look at this item with a forensic light source.
In a dark room, Fisher attempts to uncover the image under a Luma light. She is certain that the impression is some type of handprint. If she can get a clear image, it could provide the proof they've been waiting for.
I'm doing a visual examination. The forensic light source produces various wavelengths or colors of light. Hopefully, these colors of light will help to enhance the rich detail that is present on this item of evidence.
But the results are inconclusive. Fisher needs to run another test, a long shot used only as a last resort.
AminoBlack is a dye stain process. It's reacting with proteins that may be present in fingerprint residue. It's one of the last processing techniques that we use, mainly because once we use it, it can potentially destroy any other rich detail that is present on an item of evidence.
Have investigators found a usable handprint? And if so, will it tie David Colbert to Michelle's death? Police suspect David Colbert is responsible for the death of his friend Michelle McGrath, and a palm print left at the crime scene could prove it. In their final test, lab technicians are able to bring out the details of the palm print, which are as unique as a fingerprint. But when they attempt to match it to suspect David Colbert, investigators are in for a surprise.
David Colbert's prints didn't match the prints that were discovered in the alley, so he was eliminated. I didn't think the killer had a prior connection to the victim, so we needed to look somewhere else for our suspect.
And some routine police work begins to pay off.
We had a local lookout on the victim's car all around town and the state. On the following day, two of the officers did locate a red Geo Metro, ran the tag, and determined that was the vehicle belonging to the victim and the vehicle that we were looking for.
The victim's car is left in place, and the police establish a stakeout to see if anyone shows an interest in it.
They sat on it all night long. Nobody returned to the vehicle, so the following morning we approached the car and then had it towed and processed.
But they find nothing that helps lead to a suspect. Police need another way to track the killer. And Agent Hinman believes the location where the car was abandoned could provide the clues they're looking for.
So the car was just parked here on the side of the road?
Yeah, it looked like it was just abandoned right here.
About how far was this from where the victim was murdered downtown?
We can see this is the downtown area here. This is out on Curry Ford. It's about 5 miles.
That's quite a distance. And this neighborhood is basically just single-family homes and then all of these apartments that are back in this direction?
Yeah.
Well, if the offender wanted to cover up that he'd committed this crime, it would make sense for him to put the victim in the car and move the car to another location. But by driving the car to this area, it sounds more likely that he lived in this area and he needed a ride home.
Yeah, 5 miles is a long distance to walk if he just committed a murder. It's possible he had blood on his clothing.
They now believe the car was left here for the simple reason that the killer needed a ride home.
Single-family dwelling.
So I think at this point you should focus the investigation on people who live in this immediate area or within walking distance of right here where the car was found.
For Agent Hinman, the time has come to ask for the public's help.
Right along Curry Ford Road. Maybe we can use the media to identify an individual who either saw him walking away from the car that morning or somebody who may have driven into the downtown area that night.
Sounds like a good idea.
Police put the word out to the local media, and almost immediately a report is brought to their attention with the information they've been waiting for.
Rochelle Smith left one of the same bars that Michelle McGrath was last seen in, somewhere about in the area of 2:30 that morning. Rochelle observed a young white male hiding behind a car as she was walking to hers. She became concerned, got in the car and locked the vehicle, and he came up to the window of her car, had wrapped his fist in his T-shirt and started pounding on the window, stating that he wanted to have sex with her. Rochelle started pushing on the horn to scare him away, which it did.
Just a few minutes later, Michelle McGrath enters the parking lot and is not so fortunate. But Rochelle Smith got a good look at the man before he fled. Now she works with forensic sketch artist Stephen Fusco to make a composite drawing of her would-be attacker.
The witness described the suspect as a white male, early 20s, fair skin, 5'7", medium build, short dark hair. What I do is I go to the book and I start with the shape of the face.
Slowly, the features of the perpetrator emerge.
And then I go to eyes, and then nose, and then mouth, and then chin, and then a hairstyle. And I work this progression.
Finally, Michelle's killer has a face, but can the police find him before he strikes again? Weeks after Michelle McGrath's body was found in a downtown alley, police finally have something concrete to work with.
The composite drawing was such an important break in this case because now we knew what he looked like, and since we believed he lived in the area, we were hoping someone would recognize him and call in a tip.
Just a few days later, police get the call they've been waiting for.
A man named Frank Wrigley called the police department stating that a friend of his might be the person he saw in the composite drawings. He grew up with his pen, Thomas Godinez, in Athol, Massachusetts.
The tip gains credibility when police learn that Godinez lives only 3 blocks from where Michelle's car was found, just as Agent Hinman had suggested. And the rest of the tipster's story also seems to fit the facts of the case.
Stated that on the night of Michelle's murder, 5 of them had gone down to downtown Orlando, started going to some of the clubs. At some point during the night, they missed Tommy Godinez. He separated from him and they couldn't find him.
Godinez had returned home the next morning at approximately 8 a.m. His roommates noticed deep scratches on his knuckles and blood on his boxer shorts. Later, when they saw the composite drawing on television, they called in a tip. These are exactly the signs Agent Hinman was hoping to find.
We thought he started out in the downtown clubs that night, and he had injuries to both of his hands from the struggle with the victim, and he lived in the area where the car was recovered.
Godinez denies any involvement in the crime, but the palm print found in the alley might tell a different story.
Our latent print expert here at the police department came back with a positive identification of Thomas Godinez's print.
In an emotional trial, Thomas Godinez is found guilty of the attempted battery of Rochelle Smith and the murder and assault of Michelle McGrath.
When he was first arrested, and there was relief, but you're always waiting for the trial to come because you want to see that justice is done. I think when he was convicted, and especially after he was sentenced, we were all kind of relieved that there was just a sense of closure, a sense that this is done.
Thomas Godinez is sentenced to death.
Michelle McGrath was a typical girl next door. Everyone who knew her liked her. It was such a tragedy that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thanks to the ceaseless efforts of everyone involved in this investigation, Thomas Gudinas will never be able to prowl the streets again.